Welcome to the Journos. I'm Peter Martin, Hugh McDonald and Alison McConnell with me. We're back for a new season. Delighted that you could join us as well. Don't forget, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll join the football family on plzsoccer.com on our YouTube channel and on the website. And if you download the app, you get it all at your fingertips, including live video and all the latest breaking news. Great to have you on board for a new season. We are certainly looking forward to discussing so many topics domestically, European football and world football issues as well. So if you love the beautiful game, let's get right into it. And I've got to ask you, Hugh, but remiss of me not to. Germany was a wonderful country with lovely people and a Tartan Army to be proud of.
Absolutely. The only thing that spoiled it was the football, yeah. I mean, everything else was, and I mean specifically Scottish football, because everything else was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, we were there and we witnessed the scenes, and honestly, I was saying the other day, I've watched football in 8 different decades, and I've been 5 continents I've watched football, and I was counting, and all the countries I watched it. I've never seen the likes in my life of sheer volume of numbers, Alison. At one point they closed, when we were they closed the Munich city centre, said, no more Scots, thanks. We love you, you're doing that, but we can't take another person in the centre of this town. Yeah. It was just unbelievable. But as I say, the only problem I think was Scotland. It was just, as you know, Peter, I was doing the stuff from the fan zones, and it was really dispiriting. You could just feel almost the depression of the Scots, at the displays, not in getting beat or drawn or whatever happened, but just the sort of poverty of performance.
It was flat, wasn't it? I think the performance, there was nothing to hang on. No. There was nothing there to encourage any excitement or encourage any moments or joy or glee. I think it was just the flatness of it. It was really tough for supporters.
Strangely enough, though, Alison, and I agree with both of you on this. The football, almost as if the Tartan Army were so delighted just to be there, that the pain of the football quickly, disappeared, and then they were back on the lash again.
I think it's a very Scottish thing, isn't it? Obviously, so long since you were last represented at a tournament. The last time it was just in the aftermath of COVID, so a bit different from what it was in Germany. It was a proper opportunity to go and enjoy everything that a tournament has to offer in terms of the social side and in terms of meeting other fans. I think you'd have to say the Tartan Army acquitted themselves very well. I think they enhanced their reputation off the field, but I just think on it, I think it was difficult. I think there were so few moments where you could say, this is why Scotland are here. If you think about the qualification campaign and what it offered, and those big performances against Spain, and the fluency of getting there. I know obviously there was a stuttering nature of results immediately prior to the tournament, but in terms of the qualification, I think it just lent an impression that this was a Scotland team who were going to go and really compete. And I think it was just not necessarily the outcomes that might have been anticipated. For example, the defeat on the opening day to Germany. Few of us would really have expected Scotland to win, but it was the manner of the defeat, the manner of the performances, and I think the feeling that so many didn't give a true account of themselves, either individually or as a collective, in terms of what we've seen.
Yeah, I personally, Hugh, I'm a big fan of Steve Clarke as a person, and I think he deserves his credit where it's due, getting us to the tournaments. I thought he was overly cautious, and if anything, the excuses that come out for individual players who may well have been tired after a really gruelling season, it didn't wash for me on the basis that I thought the manager really, with 3 games to grasp a really great opportunity. I mean, as you and I discussed many a time across the cities in Germany, it was harder not to qualify. And I just thought the manager got it wrong. And I wonder, in the aftermath, when eventually Ian Maxwell sits down with him, he's got a couple of years where he's got the majority of that squad will stay. He's hoping that maybe some youngsters will come in again, as they did over that 2 or 3 year period, to give him options. But I think we'll look back and say, what did you do wrong? And I think that part of it, I wonder if Steve Clarke's got to go through a learning curve.
Oh, I think so, and I think he'll say the same. The fact of the matter is Scotland have reached 2 consecutive Euros, and in both Euros they've been poor. They've underperformed. And I'm not one of these guys, oh, we should be smashing Switzerland, oh, we should be getting a draw against, oh, the Hungarians are there for the take. I'm not that at all. In fact, if somebody came back and said to me after 3 games, you had 1 point, do you know what? I'm not watching the guy, I nodded and said, you know, it was a pretty tough group. You know, Hungary went a really good qualifying campaign. Switzerland always get out of groups. They just do. I think it's 5 tournaments in a row. They always get out of groups. And Germany's Germany. You're right. So if you looked at the thing and somebody said to you, well, there's the table without looking at a game, 1 point. Disappointed not to go through, but not devastated. You say, well, that's the reality. What devastated me, and what really devastated to some, what really disappointed me was the poverty of ambition. It was the poverty of performance. It was the lack of the ability to change. I mean, I was standing in the Stad Park in Stuttgart, surrounded by 15,000 or 20,000, you know, highly inebriated Scots, including Tam McManus.
Yes.
And every one of them saying, well, none of them, I don't know how many B licenses or certainly no UEFA Pro licenses. And everybody said, can we change something here? It's just like...
Even I think like you had guys like James Forrest, somebody who had been really instrumental towards the end of the season for Celtic, a player of vast experience, a bit of creativity, a worker, hard worker.
And can play right.
Who can play both. I thought someone like that to come in, even if not to start, but maybe to come in and change it during games. I thought decisions like that I found fairly baffling, and I think it would be shared by observers of...
The Forest is a great point, because with about 30 seconds or whatever it was to go in the match that you had to win, you see, you've just got to, I'm exaggerating, but with time running out of the game to win, you see he's got to bring on somebody direct and goes for it. And he brings on Lewis Morgan instead of James Forrest. And listen, Steve Clarke knows more about football than I'll ever know, but I would love to sit down with Steve Clarke and say, listen, Steve, what was your thinking of bringing on Lewis Morgan, who wasn't near your initial squad, instead of bringing on James Forrest, who's got X amount of caps?
I know it's well after the fact, and we're only giving it as an overview since we were there, and this is our first Journos show back. I think if I was looking at it, I wouldn't be asking him about the last game. I would the whole aftermath for me would be, you know, Germany, very poor. We knew we weren't going to win it, but Switzerland were there for the taking. And with 15 minutes to go, throw on Shanklin, throw on Forrest, throw on players that can make a difference. And that for me was where I started to get really worried, because I thought to myself, this is too cautious. Switzerland were there for the taking. And then you get to Hungary, and then eventually we get desperate. And at 76 minutes to bring on Stuart Armstrong, for me, just beggared belief. But by the same token, I think you will look at it. And the final question before we leave that Euros is looking forward to a new tournament, looking forward to us trying to qualify for the next major tournament. Are we in a good place? Are we optimistic about what we have in reserve that can come through? Because when Steve Clarke took over, I remember sitting with him in the early stages of his tenure, and I said, God, you haven't got a centre-half. You've got no centre-halves. He was struggling for a right-back at the time, and he didn't have a goal scorer. And I looked at him and I thought, well, you're up against it. And he laughed and he said, that's the job now. I've got to search for them, and I've got to hope some will come through. And over his period in charge, some have come through and emerged and got into the side and given him options. But I wonder, do we have to go to the same well again with this crop of players, with maybe 1 or 2 coming in? And did he change our lack of scoring ability? Did he change our inability to defend?
Well, he's got problems here, because the team does need a reset. There's no doubt about that. There's in positions, people are getting that a bit older. In his defence, I think the loss, and the people will, I can hear the roars of laughter. In his defence, I think the loss of Dykes was huge for him, because Dykes would at least get you up the park. He didn't have a player that could get him up the park.
Or even just hold the ball up.
Just just throw it long. And then
Doak as well. I also thought
Doak was. And actually, losing a right back was it. I'm not slagging Anthony Ralston, because Anthony Ralston's just been the scapegoat for everyone else. But at right back, if if you had somebody who was really pacey and could cross, you know, I'm talking about a Patterson or a Hickey, that would have brought us up the park.
Yeah.
The point of the matter is, he's got a limited pool. I think he's got to change. I think Hickey coming back, Doig coming back to fitness, Lewis Ferguson being fit, Billy Gilmour will still be there, the brothers there. Will Conway be an option at centre forward? I see he's going to move to the Championship, so you're going to have a Championship striker there. He's quick. Does Shanklin kick on? But Shanklin's what, 29? So you know, even if he does kick on, he's going to be in his 30s at the World Cup. So he's certainly got his work to do. By the way, I think he'll do his work, because one thing about Clark is he's not come out publicly, but he is a guy. First of all, he's an excellent coach. I think he's had two poor finals, but he's a top class coach, and he's also a guy that learns.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you optimistic?
I'm not sure if I'd use the word optimistic, but I would say I think if you look at where Scotland were, if you go back a couple of years and look at where they were and look at where they are now, I think you have the foundations there. I also think it's been really important for all that back-to-back Euros have been poor when you've got there. It's been really important to qualify. So I think the fact that you've done that, you're in a better place than you've been any time in the last couple of decades. It is now just an opportunity, I think, for some kind of reset. I do think there are issues within the team. I think there are problem areas within the teams that you need to address. There are, however, shoots of positivity when you look at players coming in. I think Lewis Ferguson could be huge for Scotland across the next couple of years. Doak is a very exciting young player. You need to remember he is only 18 still, but when what you've seen of him in flashes, the sporadic performances for Liverpool last term before the injury, certainly it would look as though there's cause there for optimism and encouragement. I think striker has always been a headache for Scotland for a long time. I think that is a problem position. Tommy Conway's an interesting one.
Yeah.
My last point would be that the World Cup, without going into it and we're moving on, but have a look at the World Cup qualification, how many Euro teams are qualifying and out of what groups. It's going to be really, really tough to qualify for the World Cup for Scotland.
Yeah, okay. What did you make of the Euros? And what do you make of this week? It's a strange week building up to Scottish football and the start. I don't know if we are exhausted by the football, and then suddenly this is a kind of a quiet move towards the start of the season. Usually Scottish football delivers something that annoys the life out of you. But it's a fairly quiet one. It might liven up the next couple of days. But as far as the new season is concerned, you know, it's the same old questions which rear their ugly head. You know, who's going to come third? Is it going to be Celtic or Rangers? Who's going to be relegated is your questions. The one that annoys me the most is the fact that we don't have that third team that could somehow either split them or compete with them in Scottish football. And the overall structure of the league, when you hear the narrative from Neil Doncaster, it is one of positivity because quite simply we have a fan base that is fanatical about football and just wants to suck it up. So the stats are there. The fans will turn out in great numbers, but I wonder if the product is there. And we always get to the end of August and realise we've got very few teams left in Europe, and we're sitting bemoaning and wondering about this league and whether just because it's bringing in a lot of money for certain clubs, whether it's the right structure for it, Hugh.
Yeah, but as we always go, the structure will not change because of the structure. It's like this. It's almost
Scottish football's 1984 chapter.
Aye, because you've got a structure that ensures that the structure stays the structure. When I'm talking about the voting.
Yeah.
So we're really hit there, and people say, well, bring in an independent regulator, and this is happening in England at the moment, or the moves towards this happening in England. And when that gets towards push or shove, can you imagine the amount of money that'll be thrown in litigation against the government's plans and lobbying? I'm talking about hundreds of millions. Can you imagine Man City, Man United, Chelsea, whatever, all sitting in a wee cabal and saying, they're talking about bringing in a guy or a woman that can tell us what to do? I don't think so. So they'll be, it's it's a huge, even when you've got some kind of impetus to do it, it's still got huge barriers. So my bottom line is that great saying of the modern young, it is what it is, and it is what it is I think, for the longest foreseeable future. The only thing that can change in Scottish football is a complete restructuring outside of Scotland that impacts on Scotland. By that I mean a European Super League, which opens up possibilities for clubs in Scotland to do other things. England might be more receptive then, or non-top six or non-Super League teams in England might be more receptive to have a cross-border league, etc., etc. That's the only way it changes, Peter.
Yeah, and that's our competition for today on the Journos. See if you can work out what Hugh was talking about with the structure that's the structure that's the structure. Because I was lost by the third structure. But I know,
it can't change because it's inherently resistant to change.
Well, I agree with you because
it's set up so it can't change.
Yeah, the only reason I say that, and listen, the reason I mentioned that is because, you know, we were reflecting in the office, looking back at, you know, starting out as a young journalist, and from my point of view, you know, as a young football fan, looking and loving going to Tannadice. I'm delighted Dundee United are back in the league, but loving going to Tannadice to see really good players that they had, to see Aberdeen contest with Celtic and Rangers. And since 1985, Celtic have won 21 titles and Rangers 18. And since 2000, it's just been an unbelievably dominant Celtic. And to be fair, if you were looking at the way the whole thing's looking at the moment, you know, Celtic is going to take something. It's going to take an investment change to dramatically alter Celtic's dominance of this tournament, because I think it's got the makings of a one-horse race for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I can't see anyone competing with Celtic. Even, you know, there's a lot of noise just now about the fact that Celtic haven't added to the squad. They've got all this money. They've not been successful in recruiting players. I think Brendan Rogers has been fairly clear about wanting to add quality. They've not been able to do it so far. Even if Celtic were to start the season with this squad, and I think they will have players in, they may lose Matt O'Reilly too, but even without it, you would have to say in a domestic sense, there's no one that you could see touching them. I don't think Rangers have got the resources to compete across the entirety of the campaign. I certainly don't think anyone outside of that would have the ability to compete at all. I think you would have to say in a domestic sense, I think Celtic's dominance at the minute is unparalleled and it's unrivaled. I can't see where a cohesive threat to that would come from.
Yeah, and the one thing about it, and this is where I hope we get an improvement, Hugh, and I think there's a huge responsibility this season for clubs, maybe even managers, because we talked about Steve Clarke and his approach, which may well have altered the way Scotland went about their business. But I think there has to be, in my mind, if we want to see a better quality of football this season. I thought last season the quality of football was absolutely woeful, and it was reflected in a number of performances in Europe, which told its own story, and it was also reflected in the fact that, you know, I make a point of going to so many games out with Celtic and Rangers to see what they're doing, how they're competing against each other, and my God, some of the games were absolutely terrible.
They were, I agree with you. And the first point is the only way you can judge the quality of your own league is when your own league plays people outside your league. Yeah. That's when you know. Because people go, we've got great teams in the league. Well, wait a minute. You just got beat off Brno Skotkovic 7-2 in aggregate in the third qualifying round of the European Conference League. That tells you a story. So that is the other thing about Scottish football, and it's become really incredibly clear to me over the last couple of years, is that you know that I mean, me going to a big game now would be going to a championship match. I do this feature which is on the road and I go right down the leagues. I'm absolutely stunned by the amount of interest in Scottish football. Not just like, see, if you take it the high end that, you know, Hearts season tickets are out, you know, sold out. I think Hibs are with 14,000, 15,000. Aberdeen have got, 15,000. It'll go right down Dundee United, Dundee, all these teams have got really good, and they all know they're not going to win the league. That's a certainty. And they'd all probably take getting to a cup final.
Yeah.
The fans are not going, oh, let's... But if you go down the league, you can walk into... I walked into Kirkintilloch on Saturday, and there was 900 people at Kirkintilloch, Rob Roy v Renfrew, in 1, 2, 3, 6th, 5, 6, maybe 7th tier of Scottish football.
Yeah.
So what we've got in Scotland is this huge commitment, almost family, visceral commitment to football, but to a product which is... It's in decline. It's as simple as it's in decline.
Yeah, we're not getting enough of the home-based players for me being given the chance to play 50 to 100 games. That's the first thing. Sometimes I think the fear of the structure that you're talking about, it actually, as Stephen Robinson said in this studio last season, if I go 3 games playing the way you want me to play and we've lost these games, I'm out of a job. So I get that fear factor that managers are under. And even the overall way that they went about playing their football at times for me was hard to watch. And last season, let's not forget, Alison, we witnessed Aberdeen and Hibs in the bottom half of the table.
I thought last season was particularly poor. I thought when you looked outside of Celtic and Rangers, who both I think were fairly inconsistent at points themselves. Celtic I think came good towards the end of the campaign and kind of motored on a bit, went through the gears, but there were really turbulent points for every team. But out with Celtic and Rangers, the lack of consistency of any other teams was notable. Yeah. I think teams struggling to piece together any significant run of form, but for clubs like Aberdeen and Hibs not to make top 6 it should be unthinkable.
But you talked about Celtic and Rangers there. I mean, and this is the narrative sometimes that is forgotten from last season from fans, not from me creating a line or you saying something or newspapers or other broadcasters. Fans were saying, since Brendan Rogers come back, only had 45 minutes and 2 half-decent 90 minutes. They had 6 games. Towards the tail end of the season, there was a couple of games where they actually thought, this is good. Brendan Rogers' Celtic side in pre-season looked good because now he's slowly but surely won everybody over, got the plan of how he wants them to play. But there was no spark for the season for Celtic fans. A lot of them were calling in to phone-ins and talking to us and saying, the football's dire. And the Rangers fans were looking and saying, wait a minute, we've had to suck up games against teams who've been beating us that should never have beaten us.
Yeah, I think for Celtic, I think there was no doubt there was a hangover. At the start of the season, there was a Postecoglou hangover. Everyone had bought into Ange Ball and what he brought and this fantastic domestic success and the way the team were playing football. And then I think just the abruptness of the ending, I think there was definitely a hangover, and then obviously the mixed feelings about Brendan Rogers returning to the club, and I think the football was a bit different. I think it wasn't the same kind of style. I think Brendan was at pains to point out and show why it hadn't actually differed hugely. People will draw their own conclusions on that. For Rangers, I think obviously a really awkward start to the season, and then you bring in a new manager and all of a sudden there was a bit of optimism. They looked as though they were going to push Celtic at one point, and then of course when the pressure kicks in, when you find yourself in that position, it was a squad that really struggled to cope with the pressure of where they were and then the expectation of going on and delivering a title. But I think for long periods last season the football was flat. I think the performances were poor. Again, you would look back at the European performances and results and say they were largely poor. Rangers, I think at points have punched way above their weight in terms of European success. Celtic, I think the Champions League's a different proposition. I think when you go in, the gulf, certainly across the last 5 years, I think the gulf has become incredibly substantial between the elite level and what we have in Scotland, and I think that's reflected in some of the results that you see. Yeah, and when you get a team that consistently has to sack their manager, you start looking at the boardroom and asking the question whether they're actually clued up on what it needs. And
I'm looking forward to seeing Jimmy Tilline's Aberdeen and the high press and the type of player that he's going to recruit, because Aberdeen were murder and have been for 3 or 4 years, and they just haven't got it right, and they haven't got the strategy right, and the players that they've been bringing in.
Incredible turnover of players at Aberdeen. If you look at how many...
It's unbelievable, but you're looking, you're saying to yourself, Hearts, I think, are in a good place. I look at Hibs and I thought to myself, I think Hibs are going down I mean, I like David Gray. I'm a big fan of David Gray as a person. I want him to do well, but I think he's inexperienced. And already David Gray is suddenly, been destabilised by the fact that you've got a Black Knights with 25% saying, oh, we wouldn't have picked the director of football and we wouldn't have gone with that manager either. I mean, what a vote of confidence that is.
I know.
And that's more World Cup result.
And Kelty didn't help either. I think it's interesting. The Tilline thing, I think, is one of those ones where if you're looking at Scottish football and you know somebody, you say, that is a terrific appointment. That's a wonderful appointment. So it's visionary. You're bringing in a guy that's got a strategy, has got a CV in another league, good CV. This is magnificent, great. And this is what the last, we're talking about the opening days of August. This is fantastic, great strategy and all that. October, he loses 4 games.
I know.
Who are these idiots that thought you could just pluck a guy from such and such and such? So that's how it changes.
Yeah.
I mean, last season, and listen, I make no apology for this. I sat here last season, towards the end of the season as well, saying, when we're talking about manager of the year, I think Clement's in for a shout.
Yeah.
How mad does that look now?
Yeah.
At the time,
he could have potentially won a treble.
He could have. At that time, they were favourites. The bookies would tell you favourites for the league.
Yeah.
They were hurting them. So the point I make is, what Aberdeen's got to do now, what Dave Cormack has to do now, is to say, Tilline is what I want. Tilline's ideas are what I want. Tilline's background is solid. There's going to be tough times. There's going to be ups and downs. He's bringing in a new style. People will find the flaws in it, etc. The players know it. And see, when it gets tough in the dog days of October, November, or even towards it, I'm sticking with him. Mm-hmm. Even if we finish outside the top 6 at the end of the season, I'm saying, right, Jimmy, we go again. Because now that's all right saying that now.
Well,
but when you're in the storm,
when you're sitting on a Saturday afternoon in the director's box and people are screaming at you and screaming, that's when it becomes really tough to say, I'm going to stand my ground here.
Ali, as we get into the 12th year of PLZ soccer, I've never witnessed pundits and players and managers past and present coming in this studio and suddenly saying he's under pressure after 4 games.
Aye.
Honestly, but that's the way it changed. And the whole, you're listening to people, I mean, it's a different kettle of fish for phone-ins because they've always been erratic in their nature. But you look at people now and they're sitting in the stand going, this guy hasn't got it, he's under pressure.
Social media amplifies a lot of the noise too, because and it's interesting because what you tend to have is that you'll go to social media when there's a negativity. What you have is a lot of noise when it's not going well and when people want to vent, and I think that creates some of the pressure now around clubs, and it's a vacuum, or it was a vacuum that wasn't entirely there. Maybe you go back 10, 15 years ago, you might have had your phone-ins and newspaper columns, but it wasn't the same intensity. Absolutely. It wasn't the same every second of every day that someone is talking about it and tagging you in it and creating polls, and there is no escape from that at all. And people, managers, players are all telling you, we're not on social media. It's a lie. You can't miss it. You can't possibly be completely oblivious to the fact that that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see top half and bottom half once we get into those cold winter months and who has managed to hit the ground running. Will it be an Aberdeen? Unless Hibs sort themselves out, could they be under a bit of pressure with a young manager who needs the backing of a board? If I was talking about fans who are happy. Might not be happy if the European results don't go their way, but certainly on the basis of last year, St Mirren and Kilmarnock, both with good managers, good solid boards, and they look the most stable of all the clubs that I'm looking at.
But today.
Yes, absolutely.
Lose your first 3 games of the season.
I agree as well that not only stable, but there is a genuine expectation of stability, because Stephen Robinson just didn't have a good season with St Mirren. He's had good seasons with St Mirren on the back of good seasons with Motherwell. So and McInnes doesn't need any back up. McInnes is, and certainly in Scottish terms, and I would think beyond. I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean, and the other thing about McInnes at the moment is he always sitting there saying he's got what he wants in his squad. Managers always want a bit more, but he knows what he's got in his squad. He might lose one or two as the window progresses, but he knows what he wants. And he's got a club, a chairman that absolutely reveres him and respects him. So he's got a real good stability. Football, once it comes into contact with reality, anything could happen. But I'd be very, very surprised if Kilmarnock had any. I saw them get beat at Ayr United about 2 weeks ago as well, but there was no alarm bells. It was just like, it was an early season out and blah, blah, blah. I think they'll be fine. Yeah, absolutely. Give us your thoughts on the structure of the league, as Hugh puts it, and also what you thought of the football last season. Does there need to be a vast improvement? Does there need to be a change of the way managers go about the playing of the football? Are we trying to be football purists, or is there just a need to try and get better players out there playing a better style of football? Give us your thoughts on that. Of course, Celtic and Rangers fans will have their thoughts on how their team is shaping up. We'd love to hear from you on that, especially in the comments section below, and you can put it across on the app as well. If you get into the comments section, just drop it in there and it drops straight into our server, and we'll see your comments and read some of them out over the course of the season. So lots to talk about this season, and if you join us on the football show regularly on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday, we will have the football show for you at 4 o'clock live. We'll also have the women's football show. We'll have Straight Talk as well. I'll be continuing my one-to-one series, and we've got the Journos, and we'll have special journalists in here talking with us throughout the course of the season. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button. From the overall picture of the Scottish Premiership, well, what about Rangers and the predicament that any manager of Celtic and Rangers has? And I noticed that the chairman, John Bennett, has come out, and he's obviously trying to be as transparent as he possibly can be about the upheaval that Rangers have suffered with the stadium. Obviously the blueprint that the manager has and the club wants to go down, I think it's a similar strategy that they'd like to employ that Celtic have displayed over the last 5 to 10 years. Is it enough to satisfy the fans who are crying out about having to go to Hampden? Is it enough that they're looking and saying, well, is there enough quality coming in? Are they happy with the players that are going out? John Bennett's doing his best to try and offer as much as he possibly can from a boardroom perspective. It's not enough for the fans, but that sometimes should not be the defining criteria, because at times in a football club you've got to say, see what we're doing is right. There's a lot of noise out there, but what we're doing is right. We believe in what we're doing, it's right, and it's going to... The problem with Rangers is they've talked about this transfer model for, 4 or 5 years? Yeah. We've got to do this transfer model. And then when it's come to implementing a transfer model, they went, oh no, we've got to win the league this year, so let's spend all our money on players that are 26, 27.
Yeah, and I think that's what John Bennett was talking about, that they've been guilty of a short-term view.
He's been on that board that's been guilty of it.
Yeah, but the only thing I would say about
case in point.
The only one thing I would say about him being on that board, though, Hugh, is, and I might be wrong, but I see less and less of what I would call 4 or 5 people all offering an opinion, because Bisgrove's gone. Suddenly Douglas Park's away from the thing. If I was looking at that Rangers board right now and saying, well, who is the figurehead? John Bennett
Absolutely.
suddenly has come to the fore, and all of the noise and the people who wanted to have their tuppence worth thrown in has gone away. And I think that, you know, I think that's a positive step. I mean, because I think if you've got one person who's driving a Dave Cormack who suddenly is there, an Anne Budge at Hearts, you know, to an extent at Celtic it was always Peter Lawwell. Michael Nichols is not as at the forefront, but certainly Peter Lawwell was at Celtic for 20 years. So you have someone who's driving the narrative. But with the Rangers now, I think they're slowly getting to that. I accept he was on the board, but he did say we've been guilty. Hands up, we've been guilty of that short-term view.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, they've got to now say, and I think in his rhetoric the other day, in his 20-minute address to the nation, he was quite clear, and it was all caveats and backstops and things like that. But when she went through it, he said, they're talking about there is no money. We've spent 11 million already since the beginning of the year. You're basically not getting more until we can regenerate. Now, most fans, it's always the same with transfer models. Most fans will say, of course we've got to do this. Of course, we've got to do that. But when you do it, they crack up. Most fans will say, isn't it great that, we buy Matt O'Reilly for 1.5 million and he's at least a £15 million player now. He'll go for more, but I think that's the latest bid. So you've increased it tenfold. And everybody will say, oh, isn't that great? Until he goes... And you bring in Jimmy Bloggs, or to replace him. They go, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And it's the same. It's like what I got from. I wonder if you got the same from me. I thought Bennett was saying, "Listen, the shop's shut, and we're going to maybe have to suck up. Years not won the league." That was the undertone I got. I mean, he couldn't say that, but he's saying it's unsustainable to us to win 2-3 titles, and it might be even
because it takes investment.
It takes investment, and it takes time.
Yeah, but if you're John Bennett, Alison, and you, with the board, are saying, right, here's our strategy. We need to move away from this short-termism. We need to start buying players that we see as a long-term investment, that we might be able to sell on. The Ryan Kent mistakes and the Morelos ones, we've got to forget about that. And he's sitting there on the board, they're all agreeing, and then all of a sudden, somebody chaps his door and says, by the way, there's a problem here with the stand. And then all of a sudden, here comes a bill. And then all of a sudden they say, and there's a delay. Now, you can make jokes or listen to the noise on social media. The fact, whether it's delays in steel or whether it's caught up in one ship, is irrelevant. The fact is Rangers have to move to Hampden. So he's got that in the equation, which has come out of left field. And suddenly he's saying to himself, well, maybe that extra bit of money that we were going to give to
It's gone.
Philippe Clement is gone. Because I think Philippe Clement is looking and saying, the vision that I was sold.
I don't think there's any doubt of that. If you think, well, what are the undertones of that 20-minute address this week? What have been the undertones of Philippe Clement this summer? I think that's exactly what he said. I think it's a very, very difficult position that Rangers are in. I don't think there's any genuine funds to go and say, as he did when Steven Gerrard came in, right, there's a concerted effort here to go and challenge for the title. I think there's a realism now that you can't compete with what Celtic have got because financially they're in a different plane, they're in a different orbit from anyone else in a domestic sense, Rangers included. I think there has been lessons not learned repeatedly. You talk about Kent on Morelos, and Celtic, I think maybe were guilty of it sporadically. You look at Artur Boruc, there might have been the odd example of keeping a player too long and losing a significant amount of money, but by and large, across the last 2 decades, it's been hugely successful, and it's been a restructure that was always traditionally, since about 2003, from when the club said, or 2004, it cost us money to get to Seville, it cost us money to, we didn't make money this season, the whole structure has to change, the wage bill has to come down, and it's largely been successful. But the point is that it's not easy to do. It's not easy to go and source a Matt O'Reilly and sell him for 10 times. It takes a huge amount of work in the background and luck too, You know, you can do all your due diligence. Sometimes it comes down to luck. If you look at the success stories against the failures, have been a
Tons of
significant
failures.
amount of failures, but your success stories
Yeah.
largely bypass it. Rangers just haven't been able to get that right at all. They've not been able to do it. And part of it is as well, you need a strength, because Peter Law has never really had credit for that. It's been criticism. It's been a perception of being parsimonious. It's a perception of always wanting to do things cheaply. It's not, you have to be quite a strong figure to be able to say, this is the way we're going to do it. And when everyone is kicking off, when you see the success, people still complain about it. People are still critical of it. People aren't entirely buying in to the vision of what you're doing. You have to be very, very strong as a board to say, to stay entrenched and to keep the belief that what you're doing is the right thing to do.
But that's the point that I think David Robson was making in the newspaper over this week, when he said, you know, as a former Rangers player, you need that stability. John Bennett needs to show the backing of Philippe Clement to say, okay, while I try and get this difficult structure that you're talking about, and while you've got this group of players, I'm going to stick with you. Let's stick with this blueprint. It's going to be a real test of nerve and a test of the fans' patience, because I don't think they have it.
It's this, you're dealing in a culture, and even Bennett alluded to this all the way to is win. If you win, I wonder many times the word win. I know we've got to win. Rangers are all about winning, win. So you've got a fan base that's all about winning, you know, for right or wrong.
Be dominant.
But you imagine John Bennett sitting in now. He's put, I don't know how many millions of his own money he's put in. He's packed in. He's packed in working, and he's now full time. He's packed in working. They made him a very wealthy man. He was a very successful hedge fund investor. How many millions has he put into Rangers without any chance of getting a buy? Let's be honest, it's confetti stuff. And even if they sell the club and that, he's the only. And he's sitting there, and he's walking out of Ibrox, and there's a crane on the park, right? A big crane. And everybody's screaming him, transparency. And his answer to that is, I think ship 2 will be sailing at, well, they say it'll be sailing at such and such time, but it's got to go into Singapore. And ship 3, well, and this is no John, this is him trying to be transparent, and he can't be. So he's got all of that, then he's got to do what Clement incredibly said, what Celtic doing is a renovation. What we're doing is a rebuild, right? So he's got that. Now, maybe at one time, everybody settles down and says, right, we're at Hampden, we suck it up, blah, blah, blah. We're going for a long term. Again, I take you back to Jimmy Doolan, only to the nth degree. I'm talking about a November morning. The Rangers have lost the first Glasgow derby. They're 4 points behind the league. And they go to Ross County and they get beat 2-0. Well, everybody's saying, do you know what? We're all in it for the long term.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine. We've got the strategy right. We're back at Ibrox. The stadium's fixed. We've got Diamandi. He looks like he'll be a player later on. And we Agamandi, and this wee boy here and that boy. And everyone's going to be fine in 2025 or 2026. That's a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
First one's the qualifiers. The first big headache.
Sure.
The first. That is
Exactly.
your first test. Is this, and that sets a tone. That sets an immediate tone. And if that's not successful, the hangover from that is incredulous. And you've seen it.
What was Saturday?
Yeah.
High noon on Saturday.
Yeah, but I think I think you've hit the nail on the head, Alison. Yes, you can lose. I mean, Dick Advocaat lost the opening game to Hearts at Tynecastle. This is not a Dick Advocaat team, by the way. I'm not trying to draw comparisons. I'm just saying you can lose a game, an opening one. Celtic lost 2 opening games with
Tynecastle under Ange Postecoglou.
Well, with Wim Jansen, and they were calling for his head after game.
Henrik Larsson's debut at Easter Road.
So I think from that point of view, John Bennett can stay focused on that. But one of the things that I think John Bennett and the board will be looking at and thinking long and hard about is, this is a real roll of the dice on the finances if we could get to the group stages of the Champions League.
It's massive. You cannot. This is the biggest game for Rangers, I think. These qualifiers, you cannot underestimate how huge they are, because they shape the very future now of the club.
Biggest qualifier since 2012.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge because it is the finances at the Champions League, and obviously we all know what the Champions League is this season about the reformat, and you're banking, an estimated probably 50 million to 60 million pounds. It is altering. It alters entirely the complexion of the finances at the club.
And it could help John Bennett and the Rangers board with that structure moving forward for the next couple of years. So
Also, though, it places an incredible amount of pressure on the manager and the playing staff. It turns the focus again onto them too. Now, given we all know the nature of these games, they come so early. It's difficult. They're really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Rangers fans out there, give us your thoughts on John Bennett's comments and what you think about the playing staff, and of course being allowed the time. Would you sacrifice 1 or 2 years on the way to just get that structure right and moving forward with a successful transfer policy and recruitment policy just to get it right long term, or do you think it needs a short term hit once again? Just before we finish, Willie Collum is in there as the head of the referees. He's met up with the managers. I wonder if they were all there. Sometimes that's their biggest complaint at the start. They don't get that communication with the managers to enlighten them of what's going to happen for the new season. VAR caused so much consternation, not only in Scottish football, English football especially as well, when we were watching it unfold, much to the annoyance of so many managers, players and fans, and across Europe as well. I get a real sense of a different interpretation of how it's implemented. So Willie Collum has reached out that hand of friendship and communicated that VAR this season, obviously they're going to look at that handball rule and how it's implemented, which I think was a real point of anger. And then I think the suggestion is there's going to be a lighter touch from VAR this season, which I really hope is the case.
I hate VAR. I think it's irrevocably damaged football. Certainly in a watching experience, you can't even celebrate a goal now. You're watching a Scotland game and you're going, was he offside? Or
Tony offside.
Anyway, but it's here and it's not going anywhere. I think the biggest move is to make it as non-intrusive as possible, and I thought the Euros was very good at that, Peter.
Yes.
It was quick. It was very
swift.
swift.
They had the better technology for offside. They had that fancy Dan offside thing, so they were quick on that. But the great thing about it was they didn't intrude the way that, and sometimes that doesn't work to your benefit, because I would say, surely the referee should have looked at the Armstrong tackle, or surely this should have been looked at, but they didn't. They decided that it had to be clear and obvious before they asked it, and they were absolutely consistent in that. They were consistent in that. So I think Collum instinctively is, and you can see that as a referee and as a man on VAR, instinctively he's a man that doesn't want VAR to re-referee games. You saw that with his own refereeing performance. I think Willie would be one of the few guys that's walked to a screen and went, nah, I'm quite happy with what I decided, thank you very much.
Yes,
which is it.
I'd like to see a lot more of that.
And the second thing is he looks at things, and as a VAR referee he goes, you know what, that might have been a penalty. Most famously, the handball at Celtic Park. He said, yeah, but I don't think it's clear and obvious.
The other thing I do like, and I thought it was refreshing to hear the comments of Philippe Clement saying, listen, okay, I was angry with him with one game. He came back the next game, had a good game. I'm not into just battering specific referees. And I thought that was refreshing. I think sometimes it takes a manager's sensibility to open everybody's eyes.
Come on, I think he talks. I think he speaks a lot of sense a lot of times. I think there were points last season maybe you could see under pressure that there was a few moments where you maybe thought, but I think by and large, I think he's quite an impressive figure. I think he comes across as calm. You would know the background as a club that Rangers have had with Willie Collum. I think his comments were very sensible. I think it's in everyone's best interest to try and have a line of communication and maybe and maybe move on from some of the historic grievances that we've seen over the years.
Yeah, is there a responsibility, an even greater responsibility, to try and just enlighten players of their need to stop cheating? Because they will obviously always look to gain an advantage.
Listen, it's just part of the game.
Do you think there's less cheating in the game?
I don't know if there's less cheating. I think it's just become a fabric, an element of the game, like that you're trying for any kind of advantage. And to be fair, I don't know that it's not always gone on to some extent. I think anyone uses anything that they possibly can in a game to get an advantage.
Competitive people and guys, and you can talk about, managers will talk about the integrity of the beautiful game and all that.
It's nonsense.
But see if a guy gets contact in the box and doesn't go down, you better believe he's walking into a half-time or full-time manager saying, what the F are you doing there?
Exactly.
What are you not going down for? Because there's
so much money.
There's so many consequences. We talked about Stephen Robinson there saying, right, I'm going to play the Yogo Benito and I'm going to play Tiki-Taka Dingwall and so on. And he said, 3 weeks down the line, he's sitting with a cup of tea watching Sky Sports News because he's not got a job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brutal. Absolutely. It's brutal.
Yeah.
Even watch a throw-in, watch a contested throw-in and see, like, both sides will shout for it and both will appeal for it. Somebody knows that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the joyous part of this programme has been it's probably the first programme of the season where we haven't said a manager's under pressure, he's going to get sacked.
We just said every manager's under pressure and one of them will be sacked.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually had the terrible thought the other day, Peter. I was reading all the previews and all that and I went, wonder who will be the first manager that gets sacked, and going through the list.
Yeah.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah, it is. I know. Let's give them a week of respite before we eventually put the boot in. Listen, thank you to Hugh and to Alison, and of course to you for your support last season. It was absolutely magnificent, the support we got. We're going to try and bring you as much entertainment as possible, as many programmes, and try and give you all the stories concerning Scottish football, English football, European, and of course globally as well. If you want all the breaking news at your fingertips and the unique video content, download the app. If you want to join us regularly on our YouTube channel, we'd be absolutely delighted if you could hit that subscribe button and show us your support. And of course, the podcast, the downloads for the podcast have been absolutely superb. I only have to look at Germany with Hugh and myself and Tam McManus and the team out there. The amount of people who have said to us they listen to and watch the programme on a regular basis, not only here in the UK, but right across the globe. It was heartwarming to say the very least. So your support is well appreciated by us all. Thanks to Alison, thanks to Hugh for the journals today, and from myself, Peter Martin, to you. It's the start of the season. Let's get the ball rolling and let's see if we're going to remain calm on the journos over the course of this season. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.